Hi, welcome to another episode of Mic Drop Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders. My name is Gary Cox. I'm your host. I'm also the author of the book Cultivating Champions of CI, a leader's toolbox for creating a continuous improvement culture. Today is part two of a three-part episode, a series that I have with Olaf Boettger. Now, Olaf is a 26-year veteran of deployment of continuous improvement at the executive level. He's an executive coach and was such with Procter & Gamble and with Danier. And with those two companies, he's had some challenges in deploying continuous improvement that he openly talks about with me today. And he talks about how he overcame those challenges. And I think you're going to really appreciate his personal insights and lessons. Let's just jump right in. I was reading one of your posts and you talked about some challenges. So let's talk about your hard taught lesson of, overloading teams burns them out rather than excels. Because I think that you can take on too much when it comes to continuous improvement.
Indeed, yeah. So there are a lot of sort of scenarios which I see, Gary, in these questions. One is that we don't have a list. Right? People have multiple lists, or they just react by whoever shouts loudest or whoever's the last one to shout. The second one is we have a list, but it's not really prioritized, right? That's the, this is A, this is double A, this is triple A. That's not really prioritized, right? Everything's important. And if everything's important, nothing's important. And then the third sort of failure mode I see is that the priorities are not aligned. So if my list is 1, 2, 3, but my boss has a completely different list, we have a problem. So that's why one of the key things I do with my boss is literally to say, hey, boss, my top 3 priorities are these. Do you agree? And then I have a very good boss in prioritization, so kudos to him, who says, sorry, your number 1 makes sense, but that's solved. Don't worry about it. Right? We have instructions from our CEO, or what have you. So you need to have that discussion. If you don't have that discussion, you might have a priority, but if your boss doesn't agree, you're still in for an interesting performance discussion at the end of the year, aren't you?
That's really interesting. I know when I work with clients, and even when I was, at Canada Post, one of the primary, in addition to the customer, was that alignment. You talk about the alignment to the strategic priorities of the organization. And I often talk about how if you can't connect your continuous improvement effort to a strategic priority, you're going to be probably challenged in getting any resources or anybody's time to action that. Agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where when I look at continuous improvement in other companies, and I have former colleagues who now work somewhere else, I sometimes get questions from people over LinkedIn or whatever. That's what I look for, right? First of all, who's asking for continuous improvement? Is it somebody down the ranks, or is it somebody high up? And secondly, why are you doing this? Well, because everybody else does it. Meh, not a good idea. Because I read a book. Meh, not a good idea either. Because I want to drive the quality for my customers. Okay, great. That sounds like a good thing. Where is quality in the hierarchy of the KPIs you use? Well, it's actually the most important one, and that's why we need to use continuous improvement to get better in it. Okay, great. Because what we've learned in Dana over the years, probably the hard way, is that if you don't use it for your key priorities, it's not visible. It will not stick. It will not sustain, and it will be a fad of the month or fad of the year discussion where things just don't change the way we work.
So let's talk about your comment about your hard lessons about the activities of the burnout of teams, because I find that interesting when we talk about execution of projects. Is the speed of the execution more important than the number that's going on? That's a question for you. And how does that impact overloading teams?
Yeah, that's it's another good question. I think first of all, I I would typically try to rank by the numbers before we get into execution, right? So strategically, it should be clear that this project is more important than that project. And then at some point in most project management ways of doing things, you come to a commitment point, right? Some people call it project commitment. Some people call it the moment of truth. Some people have other names for it. Some call it a toll gate, where I need to make a commitment to the company to say, hey, Gary, I need you to give me so and so much money for the project. And this is what I promise. I promise you a date. I promise you a result. And I promise you to do it with this team, right? That's kind of commitment time. And as of that moment, when it changes from preparation to execution, then the timing for me is essential, because it's one of the key elements which I've just promised you. So if I promise you I'm going to do this in 2 years, then my commitment, my credibility is on the line if I cannot get this done in 2 years, isn't it? And then it becomes a balance between making sure that it's still a high quality project designed to deliver the growth or whatever we want to deliver. But at the same time, I'm also in for the execution, because another one, A.G. Leffley said back in the P&G days, execution is the only strategy a consumer ever sees. So if we're not good in execution, we might have the best strategy in the world. Nobody's ever going to see it.
That's a great point, right? That the consumer is the only one who sees the results of the execution. I think that's a powerful comment. If you're enjoying this episode of Mic Drop Insights and Lessons from CI Thought Leaders, be sure to like, subscribe, add your comments. We'd love to hear them.
So that's where continuous improvement has helped us to look at some of the patterns, right? In one of my earlier businesses, I had Europe, a European half of the team, and the US half of the team. So you have a European product manager, you get a very successful launch in Europe, commercializing to the 100%, and you get a lousy launch in the US. Okay. Then you have a US-based product manager, you get a wonderful launch in the US, and you get a lousy launch in Europe. You start to see some patterns, right? Apparently, the product managers are very well connected to their local community of sales and marketing, but not the one on the other side of the Atlantic. So we looked at that. It's sort of a more structured way of a checklist, if you like, what needs to happen in order for good commercialization to come. And I always like to use these questions, which I think Tracy Richardson in her book about her work at Toyota does very well. Do I have standard work? Is it executed? And is it good enough? And we found out that for a lot of what we were doing in the commercial parts of innovation, we didn't have standard work. So we put in standard work. We got the best people together and we said, hey, what are sort of things on your mind? What's the standard work which you do before you do a launch? And we made the process a lot more robust. And for my business back in the days, I can report that the 50% commercialization average went up to 90+% commercialization average, which was a lot of money back in the days, if you think about it. And it nearly doubled credibility, because now we came in closer to the 10 million mark of what we had promised, and making up these numbers just to make the point here.
There's a book by Aaron Meyer called the Culture Map, and it talks about I don't know if you've read that book or not, but it talks about so it talks about how when you mentioned about the European market, the division and the Americas division, the way that people give, receive, and execute on strategies and plans and communicate is quite different. The standard work sounds like that was your solution to this cultural difference that occurs between, that happens between the Atlantic.
It is to a certain extent, although you still need to be mindful, Gary, that there's still differences, right? And I give you a funny story. Well, I find it funny. Some cultures might not. You give an instruction to a German team and a US-based team. The US-based team will say, yes, sir, and execute immediately. German team will say, wait. We don't understand why we're doing this. We don't understand why we're changing. Let's have this discussion. So I have 1,000,002 questions. Okay, so you have 4 weeks of discussions with the German team. And some leaders already get nervous because they say, hey, we could have used these 4 weeks for executing and we're just talking, no, 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 no. But then after these 4 weeks, the German team executes and they execute all the way to launching on time. The US-based team will come about 2 weeks before the launch and will say, Houston, we have a problem. But why do we have a problem now? Haven't you seen this earlier? Yeah, we saw it earlier, but we didn't want to disturb the execution, right? So I'm over-exaggerating a bit, but that gives you sort of different cultural perspectives. And Erin does this in a wonderful way in her book, where you still need to be mindful about the strength and sort of the development opportunities which people from different cultures have.